Hey there. So we've got different planetary pictures that arise as the planets move through the skies on a day-by-day basis, a minute-by-minute basis, in fact. And one of the things that I like to do is look at the planetary weather, because I think the condition of the planets gives us an idea as to whether things are a bit breezy, whether things are really choppy, whether things are absolutely torrential. And I think by understanding the planetary weather on a day-by-day basis, it gives us an idea to the background that we're living our lives in. But we can also apply that to our own birth chart. So we can look at our birth chart and say, oh, that's a nice sunny chart, or yikes, that's got a lot of weather in. It also, by understanding some of the planetary patterns, we get to see some of our risk areas, you know, some of the critical areas that set off a confluence of events, you know. So what I want to do in this short video is have a look at the Grand Cross. The reason I'm doing that is because we've got a Grand Cross arriving in our skies this August, which is then reconstituting itself in September. So we have an almost same themed square or cross coming up at the same time, you know, a month apart, with one planet change or two. Actually, there's 5 planets involved in the first one and 4 in the second. So, yeah, I'm going to talk through how the crosses manifest, what's required to make them, and some of the energies that are going on. I also want to touch on what happens if you've got a cross in your birth chart, and also what happens if you've got a T-square in your birth chart. I've got a T-square. I'm going to use my chart as an example, because if you've got a T-square, as you'll find out, the T-square can get filled in by a transiting planet to create a cross. So there's a little bit to have a look through, but I'm hoping this will be around about half an hour. And by the end of this, you should be able to check this out in your own chart, see where your risky areas are, and have a bit of a feel for the energy. So the first thing to consider really is, what is a Grand Cross? You know, what do you need to make it? And what I'm going to do is bring up a chart here from back in 2014. Now, I remember writing, blogging quite a bit back in 2014, because I was a little bit disturbed by these crosses. Now, when you see my chart, you'll understand why they got my attention. Because these Grand Crosses were also, I say this is just one, but it came up quite a few times in different varieties, but they're in the cardinal signs. So the first thing to know about a cross is usually they are, if they're an exact cross, they form in either cardinal signs, fixed signs, or mutable signs, you know, because they have an earth component, a fire component, a water component, and an air component. Now that could change. You might have it slightly off if your Grand Cross is occurring right at the edge of a sign, because the cross consists of 2 oppositions and a series of squares. So, you know, for this cross to occur and to form a big square, you know, we've got Pluto here in opposition to the Sun, and we've also got Uranus here in opposition to Mars. So, you know, you've got 2 oppositions, and the oppositions are more or less at 90-degree angles to each other. So they are really crossing. And then obviously you've got the square between the Sun and Mars, and the Sun and Uranus. Uranus is also in a square to Pluto. Pluto is also in a square to Mars. So there's a lot of really tight energy. Now, if you think about oppositions, it seems like there's nowhere to run. Oppositions is where you've got this really strong polarity energy. And it's a polarity energy that is like it on a seesaw. One side appears to be winning, then the other side appears to get the attention. And it's really, really hard to get the balance point. And it's really hard to get off the seesaw, you know. It's like, which side? I also think maybe seesaw sounds a bit gentle, but think of a tug of war where you've got 2 energies pulling out from each other, you know, and one is trying to gain the foothold and the other is at the same time. So they're like 2 planetary energies in opposing signs, which means they're not in the same element, and which means they work and operate in very, very different ways. So it creates a real a frustration, but also often a no-win situation. Now, if you've got an opposition in your birth chart, you'll understand this dynamic. I've got one opposition in my birth chart. And it's the aspect that I think causes a lot of difficulty for me. I never know how to work with it. It's often difficult. Now, one of the things that I do say to people with oppositions is, even if it feels difficult, there is nearly always a way out, because there's usually a planet. Like if a planet is in a sextile to Pluto, for instance, it will also be in a trine to the sun. So any other planet that makes an alignment to one of your opposing planets is also by default going to make an aspect to the opposing planet. So there is always a planet that you can use as a release valve. Okay. Now, here's the thing with these grand squares is you've got two sets of oppositions, and also they create T-squares, by the way. Like that's a T-square, and this is a T-square, and this is a T-square. So you've got these like really, really big, frustrating aspects. But, you know, with the Sun and Pluto here, you might have said that Uranus could help to release things, or at least change the energy a little bit, you know, to move the energy around from it being in an opposition, but for it to be a bit more dynamic with this T-square. And again, you might look for another planet that is aspecting all three somehow. There isn't one here, although I see a minor aspect to Pluto, a minor aspect to the Sun by the Moon, and also this lovely trine to Uranus. So yeah, you've got this feeling of nowhere to run to, and also nowhere to hide. You know, because everything is kind of contained within the square. I saw it written recently by somebody. I was reading a blog piece, and somebody said any aspect that crosses through the middle of the chart is going to cause you problems, because this is what you're all really kind of consciously aware of on the outside, but the stuff in the middle, it's stuff that you can't really see. You know, you have to really work from the inside out to be able to affect it. So, you know, like the motivations leading to this conflict really exist inside here. You have to really delve deep to be able to move through this, rather than these lovely sextiles and trines on the outside that are really obvious. You know, it's really obvious to see where your natural abilities are, or your saving graces are, or your strategies that you use to cope. They often come out on the outside where you can see them and interpret them. So yeah, these grand crosses are quite difficult. Now, how they arise. So I've described that you have four planets forming the four corners of a square. The other thing to bear in mind is the inner planets can't do it on their own. So you won't ever see a grand cross with the Moon and the Sun and Venus and Mercury, because Venus and Mercury are always a certain distance from the Sun. They don't go into a square position with the Sun. They do go into a square position with the Moon. So you won't ever see a grand cross, you know, with Venus and Mercury. And like the Sun and the Moon, you could see on two corners, because they do form that, you know, the Moon and Mercury, or the Moon and Venus, you could see. And you might see Mercury and the Sun together on a corner, but they're never further than 90 degrees away from each other. Now, Mars has his own sort of distinct orbit of between 2 to 2.5 years. So, you know, he is quite a useful character here. He often comes into these squares. But the things that really set up the architecture for a square are the outer planets. They're really slow moving. And they are all sort of, you know, over time, they independently find themselves for long periods of time, you know, doing their own thing, and they are not dependent. You know, they're not following the Sun in the same way as Mercury and Venus are. So back in 2014, well, actually in 2013, we had Pluto in an opposition to Jupiter. So Jupiter was here. You know, this is a chart for, I think, mid-year 2014, by which time Jupiter had just moved out of this position. But, you know, can can you imagine back then you'd have had a T-square between Jupiter, Uranus would have still been in this square, Pluto would have still been in this square. So you'd have had a T-square between these quite slow-moving planets, Pluto and Uranus in particular. When they're in aspect, they create a lot of tension. People born in the mid-1960s have a Pluto-Uranus conjunction. That is really intense. So there is a similar kind of intensity. So if you are born in the mid-60s and you've got this kind of inbuilt consideration about power and needing freedom from power, and when something tries to impose itself on you, the first thing you want to do is run, which is what I notice a lot of people born in the 60s, mid-60s have. They also, by the way, have that sort of feeling of, I need to have control to feel free, which is an interesting dynamic, isn't it? So they've also been working on that. Funnily enough, the people in the mid-60s, in fact, I might look for a chart from the mid-60s, actually, because, there's a very, very strong energy of Pluto and Uranus in opposition to Saturn and Chiron. And then, if you've got a personal planet here and another planet here, say Mars, that would create a very, very intractable grand cross. That would be very, very difficult, highly, highly charged. But this one, Pluto and Uranus in the cardinal signs, the sun obliged and moved into place, and Mars was already in place here. So this was a particularly challenging one. Uranus in opposition to Mars is super fiery. We've recently had Mars and Uranus in a conjunction. So we know some of the sort of hot-headed, fiery, kind of shoot them out kind of energy, blow them up kind of energy. It's where people really lose their rag. Now here they're in opposition and also square to Pluto, which also raises the temperature. It's as if we're just turning up the dial and just turning up a little bit more. Oh, let's just turn the dial up even more. And it's like we cannot kind of comprehend or kind of understand the tension that is existing in our bodies. It just feels so immediate. And then the sun came in. Now, the sun will have moved in and then moved away. The sun is moving 1 degree a day. And so this isn't a lasting aspect. This aspect was, coming in for 8 degrees to go into it and leaving 8 degrees after. Now, if Mars also shifted during this time, the full square might have been a little bit less than, the sort of maybe coming in and out, so it might not have been 2 weeks of the sun forming this fourth corner, because if Mars moved and Pluto moved particularly, it would have, Pluto wouldn't have moved, but, you'll see these have all got slightly different values. Their orbs are all slightly different. I'm trying to use an 8 degree orb here. So Pluto is at 12. And so the sun would have been in an opposition to Pluto from 4 degrees. But the sun at 4 degrees would not already be in a square to Uranus at 16 degrees and would not have been in a square to Mars. So the first time this square came up was as the sun applied into the square with the later degrees of 18, so it's quite a balancing act to get these right. But anyway, the sun will have moved away. And then depending on, Mercury's retrograde in this particular example. So Mercury wouldn't have obliged. Depending on how fast Mars is moving at the time, where he is in his cycle, Venus may have got here. But, the moon is also circulating and often comes in on one of these points or comes into this position herself. So, yeah, there's all sorts of ways. But you often find that when there is the season of Cancer here, for instance, when the sun is going through Cancer, you might get Mercury and Venus in quick succession, filling in this gap, keeping this square going. And, we've had Pluto square Uranus from 2012 to 2015. So there would have been plenty of times when these squares came up with a Pluto Uranus theme. there are going to be some big future grand crosses coming up, not the ones I'm talking about right now, but like Neptune will go into a square with Jupiter in 2025. Pluto will go into opposition with Jupiter in 2026. Uranus will go into a square with Jupiter in 2027. And then there's going to be a Pluto square Chiron in 2028 to 2030. So there are going to be lots of challenging squares that come up. And when you consider the signs that they're occurring in, for instance, Neptune's going to be in Aries, again, a cardinal sign. Jupiter will be in Cancer. If we've got things going on around the time of October and late December, you know, they will fill in the gap and make another square. Now, I do think the fixed squares are particularly difficult because, you know, they're fixed signs. It's very, very stubborn energy. The cardinal signs really get things moving, like totally get things moving, but can be, you know, they act first, think later. So they're slightly risky as well. The mutable ones, I think, are quite accidental. They show where things suddenly occur. You know, the mutable signs are so kind of flexy and flowy and very happy to reroute the energy. So I think with these squares, when there's a lot of mutable tension, there can be accidents, you know, things that don't quite go according to plan because the energy is slightly more rushed than usual, you know, and we're not paying attention. And obviously there's a lot of internal stuff going on inside. Now, this is an example of my chart. Now I've got a T-square here, which is a bit difficult to see because I've got so many trines, but I've got Saturn here at 16 degrees, Pluto here at 9 degrees, and Venus here at 8 degrees. They're all in cardinal signs, like I said, and that's why in 2014 I really paid attention, because this square was also right over my natal square. So it was activating my planets in my T-square, which was quite painful. There was a lot of different things going on and a lot of tension and what seemed like immovable people, immovable situations. It didn't feel like there was an easy way out of anything. Now, with me, if something goes over here or over Pluto or over Venus, it just emphasizes the T-square. But when something comes into Aries, in particular from 8 to 16 degrees in the sign of Aries, then we get the fourth part of the grand square. Now, I'm actually coming up, well, I'm right in the middle of my Chiron return right now. So this is Chiron here. So Chiron currently is here. But a few years ago, when Chiron was here, I had the effect of Saturn, Chiron, Pluto, and Venus all in a square. And of course, you know, so Chiron's moving through Aries. Every spring when the Sun, Venus, and Mercury go into this area, so towards the last week in March, that is a time when my T-square is filled in. And then every month when the moon goes through this part of the chart, it brings up extra sensitivity because the moon is triggering all of these and then later moves on to Chiron. And my Chiron is in a square to Saturn, but it's just not, you know, it's out of orb to both Pluto and Venus. But I do feel that Chiron still has a bit of an energy kind of pushing it in a little bit. Now in the future, like right now we've got Neptune here in the sign of Pisces, and we've also got Saturn in Pisces. You know, next year they're moving into Aries. So I am going to have Saturn first will be coming in to fill in this gap. That will be particularly difficult. So, you know, patience is definitely needed. So I need to work on all these energies here so that as this comes in, I can maybe use the energy to stabilize things or catalyze things. And as Neptune comes in, this could be quite difficult as well. So, you know, that's just to let you know what to look for. You know, and like I say, it's cardinal, so it tends to set things off quite quickly. I've also got a T-square this way, but this is involving the South Node, the North Node, Mars, Neptune, and then a lot of planets, actually. The Moon, Ceres, and Jupiter. So when things go here in the sign of Virgo, that's particularly difficult as well. Anyway, let's have a look at this one that's coming up right now. So it's in August. It starts on the 14th of August and ends on the 15th of August. And the reason it's so fleeting is because it's the moon that's coming in to make one of the corners. So what we've got, you may have seen the video that I've done already about Jupiter and Saturn. They're in a square now, pretty much for, is it 10 months? They make 3 exact squares, and they are mostly in a square. They come out of the square ever so slightly in February, because the orb just gets too wide. But essentially, we are now in a season of the Saturn and Jupiter square, which happens every 9 to 10 years. And it's the first big point since the Jupiter and Saturn conjunction in 2020 at 0 degrees in the sign of Aquarius, which is where Pluto is right now. So there's a lot going on at the moment. It feels like whatever Saturn and Jupiter are wanting to do at 0 degrees in the sign of Aquarius, you know, the new 20-year period of the Jupiter and Saturn cycle, Pluto is here. There is something definitely big stuff going on, and you have to live under a rock to not realize that. And then, we've also got, forming one of these corners, we've got Mercury here. So Mercury is retrograde, and sorry, not Mercury. We've got Venus. I'm losing my head. Mercury's in another one I'm going to record in a second. So we've got Venus here at 11 degrees in the sign of Virgo, in opposition to Saturn, and also in a square to Jupiter. And then on this particular day, the 14th and over to the 15th, we've got the sun. We've got the moon. I'm getting all my planets wrong here. We've got the moon that goes into the sign of Sagittarius. So the moon comes in. As it comes in, it starts to form the grand square, and then it leaves, and then the grand square or the grand cross breaks up. So during this time, the moon is going to be in opposition to Jupiter. But if you see, there's Mars there as well. So it's the Mars and Jupiter conjunction, which is big in and of itself. I mean, the last time Jupiter and Mars came together in Gemini was in 1989. It's a long time ago. But in 1942, so like 80 odd years ago, they came together at the exact same degree of 16 degrees in the sign of Gemini. I'm going to be talking about that in my weekly forecast that I'm releasing tomorrow. So if you want to know about that, then check that out. So this is a really, really big day. You know, not only have we got this very rare, this conjunction between Mars and Jupiter happens every 2 years, but it hasn't happened in Gemini for 35 years. And then, you know, like I said, 80 years ago, it was at this exact degree. That was during the Second World War. And there's lots of people talking about wars and stuff like that at the moment as well. So this is a very, very big aspect to be forming in a grand cross just as the moon goes into opposition. Now, although this grand cross is going to dissipate quite quickly, on the 15th, it's then because, we're talking about the personal planets, we've got a bit of a changeover. So as the second one comes in September, on between the 10th and the 11th of September, we've still got obviously Saturn and Jupiter. Mars has moved away by this point. So we've got Saturn and Jupiter. The sun has subbed in now. So the sun has moved into that place. And again, the moon is in the sign of Sagittarius. So you see the role of the moon is really important for a lot of these crosses to manifest. So the moon will come in and then move away, leaving the T-square. So I think the T-square shows what's building and what's residual. And then it stellates into this great big grand cross, and then it eases off into the T-square again. And then eventually one of these planets moves away and you're just left with a square. So as far as I can work out, they start with a square, go to a T-square, then go to a grand square, and then they ease off in the same way. So you can see the energy building and then easing off. So yeah, this is a very, very intense time. And I think you can see that easily politically. If you do want to know more about Jupiter and Saturn, then check out my Jupiter-Saturn square video, my forecast video for the Jupiter and Mars conjunction. I'll be doing a full moon video soon as well, which is absolutely, it's got 2 sets of T-squares. It's pretty big. So there you go. I hope that was helpful to understand some of the energies going on right now. So yeah, if you've ever felt like there's nowhere to turn, there's nowhere to run, there's nowhere to hide, or that you're in an impossible, I think the word impossible is the one that comes up the most often with these kind of scenarios. It just feels like you've got your back against the wall. Now, that does sound quite terrible. You've got your back against the wall. But when I actually think about what has come from the T-squares, the T-square energy I have in my own chart, but also when that's stellated into a grand cross, it actually, I needed to think differently. Each time I get challenged in one of these ways, I need to use more creativity. I can't use my tried and trusted. In fact, if I just bring it up again, when these things happen, like ordinarily, I mean, you can see how many trines I've got and sextiles. Ordinarily, if any tension comes up in my chart, I will just think, oh, something going over my Saturn right now. Oh, well, it's offset to this lovely moon Jupiter energy. That's easy. So how can I sort of incorporate my compassion or patience or something? There's always something to offset things in my chart. I'm very fortunate. These are my go-to things, like I'll look at patterns with my North Node and Pallas Athena, or I might look at the deeper spiritual implications of things with Pluto and Neptune. So Pluto, Neptune, and the North Node. I'm really lucky that I've got these softer aspects. However, when you're always playing to your softer aspects, you don't always challenge yourself enough. You kind of take the easy way out. You sit on the fence, you see what's going on. And you do the next best thing. You do the thing that feels good. That's probably why I've called my channel Feel Good Astrology, because I'm always looking to feel good rather than to feel terrible. That's my philosophy. So if you've got something challenging, the thing that I've noticed is you can't rely on these anymore. These great big crosses, they're happening in the middle of your chart. They're happening in a place that these outside easy aspects can't touch, they can't reach. It's like you have to actually put on your big girl pants, pull up your big girl socks, and get moving. You have to roll up your sleeves just to make it inclusive. You have to put your big boy stuff on as well. You have to be a grown-up. And that's the thing. These big squares, they don't give you the chance to wimp out. You have to face the challenge that is presented. You can't turn a blind eye. You have to face it square. You have to look at it. You can't ignore it. And to me, that is the crunch of these squares. And that is how we get through them, because facing it, like literally facing it, we find our own resources. We find our own strength that we didn't know we even had. And so I do actually think they're a gift. They don't feel like a gift when you're in the middle of one of these transits. They definitely don't feel like a gift. They feel like a flipping great big smack in the face. However, they do help you find a deeper resourcefulness that you never knew you had. And boy, is that worth something. I'm just going to pause this now because I want to just find a chart from the mid 60s, which really shows, not all charts are made equal. Some charts definitely do have a lot more difficulty in them. I just want to emphasize, what a T-square really does look like in a natal chart. Okay, so have a look at this chart. So check this out. So this is somebody born right in the middle of the 1960s, 1965, in fact. And so this person has got Chiron and Saturn in a conjunction together, in opposition to Uranus and Pluto in a conjunction together. That's tight. And then Jupiter and the North Node, just, they are filling in this part of the square, and then the South Node is filling in this wing. Now, traditionally you would expect to have another planet here rather than the nodes. However, this is pretty big. This is pretty big. And for this person, around the beginning of December, when things are going into the sign of Sagittarius, it's quite challenging. But anything going over these points is interacting with all of these corners too. There is really nowhere for this person to hide, and this person has developed a habit of complete openness. You know, they cannot, they really cannot hide anything, and so they've chosen to be really, really open. Now, one of the benefits of this, I mean, this person has got some relief valves. In fact, this relief valve here is pretty beneficial. The Venus and Mercury, it's a relief valve for here. It's a relief valve for here. So that's really helping to offload some of that. The Sun here is also a relief valve for here, and a relief valve for here. So this person also plays to the strengths of their Sun, Venus and Mercury in terms of their career. So yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, how we're all gifted with different charts. This person absolutely makes the most of their chart. They don't let any of it go. I've seen charts with people born at the time of the full moon, you know, with their Sun in Gemini or their Sun in Sagittarius, with this kind of layout. It's very difficult, but it's not impossible. So anyway, I hope that was helpful for you, especially if you've got your own T-square, your own grand square, or that you're just curious about the grand square that's coming up right now. Maybe one of the points of it is on one of your birth points, or in particular on an angle, in which case you'll be really feeling the pressure of it. But anyway, watch out for your own squares, your own T-squares, how they can grow and set things off in your own chart. However you use this, I hope this is helpful to give you a sense of these things come in, they transform, and then they leave. Anyway, lots of love to you, and catch you another time. Bye for now.